Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you a little painting exercise. This is what we're gonna paint. It's a watercolor interpretation of a street view in Dublin here. You can find this photo reference in the links below, but please feel free to choose any photo of your liking. This is a evening time scene, so it would be interesting to have some photo that has lights coming from windows from the inside and as well from lampposts. So I will show you what the materials are, the main techniques that we used, and the execution step by step. So without any further ado, let's see what the materials are. So some of the materials that we need: some scotch tape, first of all, and this is just regular decorator paper tape. It's very inexpensive and really good to set your piece of paper on your table. We do, of course, need brushes, and I always recommend a variety of round brushes. I got a number 12, this is a Raphael brush, and a number 2. Both of these brushes are synthetic sable and I find they work very well. I just recommend for this exercise a larger brush and a smaller brush for details. We need then, of course, a set of watercolor, and I have here my old trusty watercolor set. The watercolors inside are a range of Winsor & Newton Artist Quality and Cotman, some Sennelier, a couple of Schmincke, but any decent quality watercolor palette would do. Just please avoid those like very cheap watercolor. They're just quite chalky and not doing the work that you wish they do. And then a series of pen and markers. I use this to refine my painting afterwards, after it is completely done. I have here these three are all waterproof pigment. Two 0.1 Unipin waterproof, one is a brown color and one is a black color, and these work very well when you have to add some details and work on the top of kind of wettish paper, or work then with watercolor on the top of the pen. This is absolutely my favorite. It's a Micron PN. Once again, is waterproof ink, but the point is like a regular ballpoint pen. I don't know if you can see it here. This works very well because it has a huge amount of line variation. And finally, we have a Uniposca. This is quite of a fine tip, although it's not the finest, and it's in a nice white opaque color. Uniposca is great if you don't have gouache on the go to add some little details on the top of your painting, especially, I don't know, reflections, lights, and so on and so forth. This is great. Be careful, it's not waterproof, so you can't really use it alongside with the water. I got here a vessel with some water. This is just clean water that I will use for my watercolor, and of course my drawings. I have already drawn the picture that I want to paint. This is because it might be a little boring to get to draw, and I really want you to apply these techniques that we are seeing today for your favorite landscape. If you're interested in the future, I may go through my sketching techniques. This is just a very simple pen outline of what I want to paint later on, but the vast majority of the work will be done in color and then afterwards with my markers and fine liners. So let's get settled and start painting. All right, this is my first time doing this type of videos, so apology for, I don't know, the terrible lighting and all of that. You will find, of course, the reference photos in the files below. It's just linked here. So as you can see, the picture is quite dark. And the first thing that I usually do is taking some of my blue paint, and in this case is a ultramarine blue, and kind of trace the shadows. Where I see a shadow, I paint blue. There's nothing much else to say here. So the main shadows that I see here are on this part, on the inside of the window, and where I decide that the light is. In this case, we do have lights coming from the artificial lights and as well from up here, from this side. So with my larger brush, I am going to start this process. As you can see, I'm using plenty of water just to be sure that I can, if I want to, lift my water afterwards. And this is one of the cases. So you see here, and on the reference photo, we have lights shining on the painting. So I'm going quickly to remove some of the blue using just a tissue paper to try and recreate what I am seeing in the photo. So just removing that tiny little bit of blue of shadows that I put there before, and adding a tiny bit where I was rocky enough to remove it all. So I think that is nice. I can see a bit of a shadow here. I'm not gonna touch the top. I will think later on if I want the top to be painted at all or leave it as a white negative space. So now, before I go any further, we have another light over here that does a little bit of a flash of light up and down. So I'm just removing the shadows over there. The inside of my door is quite dark, and we'll see later on how we could eventually tackle what's inside of the door. Now we do have a shadow being casted quite heavily down halfway, more or less, through the door, so I'm adding a little bit more pigment over there, and you can notice that my brush is still really wet. Now, I'm not a good teacher here, and I recognize that, but I'm just trying to give you the idea that you should just be quite flowy with your paint and let everything speak for itself without really minding too much. This is an exercise, and painting with watercolor, I found, is almost like carving stone, which is interesting because watercolor is so light and flowy. So but all the details will come in due course. So there's no need to be afraid of not painting a color or other details, especially when you apply this technique of adding the shadows first. Now I'm noticing here a little bit of a shadow being casted down and over here as well. It's just a matter, once again, I know that I repeat myself, but it's looking at the reference and trying to mimic what's there. Some people will tell you that that is wrong and you should probably paint more artistically around your feelings and all of that, but they never work for me too much. That's probably why I haven't had any success as a painter. But yeah, so the window here with this little curtain, you see there is a shadow that goes sideways, and then all the folds of the curtain just cast a tiny bit of a shadow as well, and I'm going to recreate that and perhaps a little bit more on the top here. Now, on that blob, I added too much. With my tissue paper, I just remove it, and now it's perfect. And I can go on adding a tiny bit of a shadow down here as well. Then this part here, it's quite dark until more or less a couple of centimeters through, halfway through the first opening. And the same darkness goes down towards the bottom on this pole pillar, call it as you wish. And you will be finding, if you follow my video, that I go back over and over, retouch it, and just trying to understand what's going on, what is the feeling that I'm trying to achieve with this painting, and as well a little bit of realness of what's happening there. Now in the picture, I know we have a couple of planters here with plant, but I decided to ignore them because we don't need to complicate our life. But the thing that I notice is that the plants are casting a shadows towards that way, so I'm bringing over the bottom of the plinth, the pillars, and I put a little shadow there and just tapping because it's just a hint of a darkness. Now with this painting, I want to have the margins to melt into the background, so I'm not going to paint the end of any of the margins, and I really enjoy leaving some of this white space or negative space, as the artist would call it. I think is quite interesting, quite nice. And then for the inside, when I do urban sketching, I usually paint the inside, but in this case, because we have lights coming up, I'm going just to suggest some of the darker parts of the rooms. I'm not going to paint every single detail, and as well I am not going to fill it with blue or dark color at all, just because I really want to suggest that there's something going on there. On the top here we do have another source of light, so I'm just removing some of the color that I left, and that will be melting into our painting afterwards anyway with the colors. Now this part I see is so much darker than what I did here, so I'm going to darken it up once again, not caring much about accuracy here, and just going in with my brush and then dabbing to remove some of the harsh edges. Right. Another point that I would like to make is the writings. If you are drawing urban sketching, for example, you will have writings almost everywhere. A thing that I never do is bothering too much about the writing, because A, I'm not really good at calligraphy, and B, I think that can be sorted afterwards using your pen, a little bit of that white thing, the Uniposca marker as well. So everything can be sorted later on. Another quick check to my picture to see if there's anything that I left. I probably will do something to this wall, so let me actually put a bit of a shadow here on the wall. Just a tiny bit, and again I'm going to remove the harsh edges. Right, last bit goes down here. Okay, so once again, let us remind ourselves that the lights come from this side, top down light. Although this is a evening image, we do still have the bright sky that shines from above. So all the lights, artificial lights in the painting, are going to be painted, but remember that even if it's very dark, if it's nighttime, there's still lights coming from above. Could be the sky, could be some street lights, artificial lights. They are usually from up and down. So I'm not going to wait until everything has been dried completely, but I will go into the painting with the colors right away. This helps a little bit to melt the colors together. So color-wise, I am going to use a combination of sap green and some payan gray for the darker part of my painting, for this lovely dark color, dark brown, dark blue. I don't really know how to describe it. If you don't have these two colors, you can use definitely a combination of burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and any green that you have. Just be careful to use enough water to melt the colors together to recreate a nice, beautiful tone, dark tone. That combination, ultramarine blue and burnt umber, is amazing to create any gray that you wish. So first layer of the greenish color, and then almost right away I'm tapping away the excess color. Now, something I like to do before everything dries up, when I'm using the main color, and in this case is of course green, I like to tap my brush and flicker some of the color on the page. And this kind of, I don't know if it brings everything together, but definitely it's an interesting touch. Right. So we are done with that. Now I'm going to get a nice warm yellow. This is cadmium yellow deep. And I know that my brush is probably a little, what you call it, it's a little dirty, but I, once again, don't care. I really want to get the best part done. So light. The light is much brighter closer to the light source and much darker going down. So the darker part is definitely down here where the light kind of disappears. So I'm just putting some blobs of light there. And don't worry if it gets green because of the blue, but that is going to change once you finish and when you put all the colors. So I'm just dabbing some of the yellow, cadmium yellow deep, and taking it off almost right away. So this is another light, and it's much darker further from the light source. So putting some dabs and taking it away. It's quite annoying as a system, I have to say, but it works every time, so I'm gonna keep it. And then this part here is kind of a metal surface that we want the light to shine. Now I'm going in with a much lighter yellow. This is a lemon yellow. And with my lemon yellow that unfortunately turned a bit green, I'm going to go closer to the light source, being very generous over here with water. And as you can see, I am not painting close to the light yet. Paper, dab away. Now let's tackle the interior of the scene first. And you can see once again the yellow cadmium deep is very present almost everywhere. So with my brush I just blob down paint where more or less I think it goes, not being too precise. Paper towel, dab it away. Right. On the inside, now we can see there is a lot of red. And because my paint is still wet, I can add that red too. So it will much together with the other colors. And this is a cadmium red. It's not probably what I was looking for, but does the job. On the inside, you can see here there are people, there are stuff going on which I unfortunately cannot focus on because it's probably way too much for this painting. With the red in, I'm going as well with some orange. This is transparent orange from Winsor and Newton. Just bring down those colors and you can see that straight away the orange reacts with the blue, creating a sort of a brown color, which is almost intended. I like that effect very much. And because I like it so much, I'm going in with some ultramarine blue to darken the interiors a bit, just in points, not everywhere. For the door, it's technically white, but I'm gonna use a little bit of burnt umber, or burnt sienna, sorry, just to give the door a suggestion only of woodness, darkness. And I'm going to be quite light because the door is white in real life. So this is just a suggestion of the shadows. And once again, I'm removing quite a bit of the paint because I really want a light tone. And you can see how the yellow stays where I put it, doesn't interact too much with the brown paint. And as well, the blue on the background gives it a lovely, lovely shadow-like effect. Right, I think it's time to let it dry completely and then we can come back with the next layer of color. Okay, it's not completely dry, but we can go on with the next step. So, because I just like to have at least the page filled with color at the very early stages, I'm going to paint the footpath and a tiny bit of the wall up there as well. So in this case, I'm using a cayenne gray and a tiny bit of the smudges of color that I have left in my palette. As you can see here, I'm adding some gray to this brownish color, which is probably a burnt umber or something that I had. And I am going to keep the color very light and just cover almost all of my footpath. And the beauty of leaving your palette dirty is that you will get all these amazing colors that you weren't expecting, and then you absolutely need when you're doing this type of works. Now, something that is very helpful with a bit of a quinacridone gold, I just add dots over the wet paint here and there, just because they give a bit of, once again, organic feeling, adding a ton of water again. To use this much water, you probably will need a nice 250, 300 GSM paper, because, you know, it is what it is. Commercial paper can be tricky to use, so I really use a very heavy paper for my paintings because I like to add a lot of water. Same quinacridone gold, I just outline a bit of the lights where that light shines on the surfaces outside the areas. Just a brief bit. And quinacridone gold is quite interesting as a color because if you don't dilute it at all, it's a nice, deep, warm brown. But when you start diluting it with water, it becomes a really bright yellow, which I find really interesting. And I always tend to use more quinacridone gold that I probably need. The quinacridone gold is just absolutely gorgeous. Now, let's use a smaller brush and let's start adding details. We want to add a tiny bit of details on the doors, on the signage, and as well on the inside, perhaps, of the situation. So you have quinacridone gold as well, completely ignoring my picture, my reference photo, and now be quite careful of staying into the borders this time. I'm just adding a few lines and details here and there, like this frame here is of a nice little gold color, so I think quinacridone gold would work decently enough. Right, now we do need to take care of that window that we haven't looked at for a while. So I'm using just some gray here, cayenne gray, and as you can see, it's turning into a bit of a green because I was using a lot of yellow all around my painting. So to change that, I'm adding some of my brown. This is burnt umber. And don't worry if it looks all muddy and all the same, this will come hopefully together very soon. Adding some additional details to the interiors, and now I'm adding darker details. So with my brown, just a bit to suggest that there is something going on over there, and also give a bit of depth. With my gray mixture of unknown color, I'm just outlining these plaques, these discs as well. not being super careful of what I paint, because with my pen then I want to give some suggestion that there is something written there. I'm not going to be super precise. And as you can see, I'm basically going from a spot to the painting to the other, just to try and achieve what I was telling you before, the feeling of carving what's going on in the painting. And this is it's difficult to explain on camera. It's more about feeling than anything else, but not really careful at all. So you may be well able to follow this step as well. I think we are done with the color stage, and then we're going to work with the pen to add the details and probably a tiny bit of color more afterwards. The painting is dry, and as you can see, the page has a little crease. It's a little wobbly, but this is not to be of any concern. This is gonna go when it fully dries and relaxes. So we're gonna use the pens here. Once again, I have a combination of different size of nibs. These two are 0.1, black and brown. This is a micron PN, it's like a roller ball in the color black, and a Uniposca in white. So this is completely optional, and I haven't seen many people doing this step. So it's something that I would say it's completely up to you. I like to refine my painting to add details using these pens. And the first thing that I usually do is to figure out where the main edges are, where the shadows should be once again, and contrasting them or highlighting them using a bolder type of ink. So let's take, for example, this window here. So I know that my light shines on the border over here because it comes from inside. So what I do is to mark again the opposite border from the light, where the light doesn't shine, with my pen. So to underline the fact that we do have an art edge over there. And so I'm repeating this step with all my edges, and as well adding some details as I go. So for example, in the middle of this square, we before have painted a shadows to have an idea that there is like a raised square or an incave square in the metal here. So with my pen, I'm just marking those two borders in which the light doesn't shine, or where the shadow is originating. And once again, I add some additional details. And I go on with this way of highlighting or marking hard edges all the way through my painting. In this case, of course, I need to be a little bit more precise than before. We've been just not too precise with the paint, but it's just a nice exercise. Now, keeping on with a combination of pens, you see how our color have been all blotchy around. Something that I do like to do once again in this attempt to give a little bit more of a texture to the painting is to add some lines within the blotchiness. They don't need to be straight line, they don't even need to be complete lines, but I just do like to go on and highlight this blob. Of course, this is not in the picture, in the reference photo, but I think it gives the entire painting a little bit of depth that is really what we like, and a bit of character as well. So this is like a stain of color. I have no better terms to describe that. And with vertical line, I'm keeping them within that stain of color. Now this is a blackboard or an advertisement board type of thing. Usually, when we have windows, we have ads, billboards, or stuff like that, we do have drippings of water coming down from that. And the paint on the wall discolors quite a bit. So I like to add consistently in my windows just a tiny bit of the same idea of vertical lines, maybe one here and there. We don't need to be super precise, just to suggest that watermark that is always present in all windows and signs although we probably don't see it, we always have it. So another cool thing that I do quite often is to unify my painting with adding these vertical accents at a point of conjunction of two surfaces. For example, in this case, I add vertical lines to the vertical panels here, and then I'm gonna follow more or less perspective for the connecting surface, as if it was, I don't know, water running off or a little bit of dirt. And that is great to bring a bit more of perspective into play, although my paintings, my drawings are almost never into precise perspective. Another idea would be down here, for example. So you see how the stones of the footpath are following some sort of invented perspective. So I add one line horizontal following the perspective line, and then I connect the same with the verticality of the piece so that this accent follows my full painting. Now you got the idea. I will keep working on this for quite a while, but I just want to show you how to use the Uniposca. So the first thing, the easiest, is to actually use it where it's really white. Apparent here is the light source. So the light bulbs here are really white, and I'm going in with the light, just very thin rays of light where I think more or less there is light. I'm not really looking too much at the reference photo. I'm just going with the feeling here. Now you see from the reference that we have an outline of tiles on this part here. And the tiles of course, follows the perspective. In the pictures, the tiles are all over the place. They are white, the outline, they are black, they are brown, and this is due to how the light shines on them. So I'm going in following the perspective, so vertically in this case, just with some suggestion of vertical lines, vertical tile. Once again, here and there, I don't want this to be present everywhere. I'm just giving a suggestion. And at some point, I will do the horizontal line, and these do need to follow the perspective of the horizontal line. And just once again, here and there, just to give the idea of what's going on. I don't want this to be a full grid of tiles. Now, another good use of the Posca pen is for windows. We all know, if you have ever painted when you were a child, that to understand or to make think there is a glass surface, we just need to do this. Some oblique lines where the glasses are. And I do like to suggest glasses where they are, because I feel like it brings literally everything together. Right, I think we are done for this painting. I keep adding details as I see them. Last, probably very last thing is to add some marks on the inside of the window, just to suggest that there are objects and people inside there. And to do so, I just like to follow the colors, the blobs of paint. I know that someone called them cauliflower because they actually remind a cauliflower, now thinking of that. Just a bit, I'm not being precise at all here, just adding here and there where I see them as a last little touch, before I can consider this painting finished. And of course, you will, if you're like me, go on and on in touching this painting over and over until you're absolutely sick of it. But this is what I was saying about carving on the page your image rather than just painting the feelings. Anyway, we are done. I really hope you enjoyed this tiny little exercise, and if you did, please consider to subscribe to my channel. This will help me sharing more with you, and I will see you very soon. Also, if you have any recommendation for me on how to get this painting exercises a little bit more interesting or good quality, or what would you like to see, that would be super helpful. For now, if you are in Dublin, just check out La Tapas de Lola. It's an amazing little restaurant. I warmly recommend it. I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.